And I think I do this for, for the future, right? For our kids, my kids, your kids. We have a responsibility, I think, always to leave things better than when we found them. And so I think that's sort of what drives me to want to do this work.
In this episode, NCAT Southeast Regional Director Margo Hale talks with Mike Lewis, a new NCAT Sustainable Agriculture Specialist. From his farm in Kentucky, along with a rooster chiming in every once in a while, Mike shares about his background, farm experience, and what brought him to NCAT. Mike also talks about his areas of expertise and projects that he'll be a part of at NCAT. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Margo Hale, NCAT Southeast Regional Director. And for today's podcast, I'm going to introduce you to Mike Lewis, who is one of NCAT's new Sustainable Ag Specialists. If you've listened to the podcast before, you've gotten a chance to meet several of our NCAT Sustainable Ag Specialists and hear from them and hear about their experiences. And so we're going to take some time and have a few episodes introducing all of our listeners and our ATTRA clients to our new Sustainable Ag Specialists. So we are so excited to have Mike Lewis join us on our team. So, Mike, will you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background and some of your experiences and what you bring here to NCAT?
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be at NCAT too. So this is great for me. My family lives and farms in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in Rockcastle County, Kentucky. I guess I really got started in this type of work around sustainable food systems and agriculture production when I was trying to stay on the farm and make money for my kids, so I could raise my children. It was really easy for my wife and I to make it on our own without any, of those expenses that come along with children.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be really easy. I was really naive. I walked into the local high school and was like, "Hey, here's some organic lettuce," and I knew nothing. And I got laughed out of the joint, and I felt really like uneducated. I mean, I like what's wrong? I followed, the protocols to wash it and bring it to you, and I get back a booklet that's, like 40 pages thick about how I can sell my food. And so I was like, well, I came home to my wife and I said, I think I got to go find a job because I can't sell what's in the ground. And so that was kind of how I started getting involved in the local farmers market. And then I got connected with an organization here in Kentucky, Community Farm Alliance. And that's how I, about 15 years ago, I started learning about this stuff called food policy and food systems. So I really, it always stuck with me. And so I was fortunate to find the work that I needed to raise my kids, doing farm advocacy work, beginning farmer programs here in Kentucky. So I was able to stay, in the farm, but not on the farm. And still meet our financial needs. So that was really how I got started in this work. I think I was joking last night with my wife and kids that I do the work I do now because I'm scared of what happens if we don't,
Right.
It's like, what's the other alternative? So that sort of keeps me going. And I think I do this for, for the future, right? For our kids, my kids, your kids. We have a responsibility, I think, always to leave things better than when we found them. And so I think that's sort of what drives me to want to do this work. And I'm excited to be at NCAT and doing it. This is, I think, we trace that timeline back 10, 12 years to where I started doing this work. And then it was decided I needed to become more educated, and I went to college. And in college, I started getting more connections. And I think in about 2012, I met Andy pressman from NCAT
Yep.
at a farmer veteran workshop. I'd been doing a lot of organizing around food security with veterans at the time, with some community garden settings, just trying to address food insecurity. I think like, a significant over 1 million veterans get food stamps, and we're one generation removed from people providing for themselves. So we started trying to teach those things. And so I met Andy at a workshop. And having been involved with this work, NCAT was the first time that I met an organization that and I don't want to say this to be negative, but that I felt like was giving the whole story, right?
Right.
The whole picture. One of the things I told Andy that every week, or at least every 10 days, I try to read Wendell Berry's In Distrust of Movements, because it reminds me not to be linear in my thought process. And so what I always liked about NCAT was that it is everything. We accept that this is an ecosystem, and it's the ecosystem that has to change. I mean, we can't just change farmers and farming. We have to change the way that we deliver the food. We have to change the way the food's consumed. And so I think what I recognized in 2012, I think it was, that I met Andy, that, this, I'm going to school for this. This is, where I need to work. And you guys waited a long time, but here I am.
Well, yeah, and I think I met you not too long after you met Andy. We met at another farmer veteran conference, and then continued to do some work with you in Kentucky and host some workshops. So it's great because you've been a longtime partner and friend of NCAT's before we were able to bring you on our team. So it's great to have that history with you. Could you tell us a little bit about your farm, some of your farm experiences, what you are producing, what you have experience with? I know our listeners, we want everyone to know the expertise and the skills that we have. So if anyone out there has questions about these things, that Mike is the person to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of our farm's production, I would call us diversified. As I said, we're on a mountain farm. We have 128 acres, but I think only 12 of it would be considered tillable. So we do a mix of crops and livestock. We have a couple cows that we breed and sell, raise bucket calves and sell finishers off to the local markets. We do a lot of forest-based pasture with our hogs. Actually, we're using our hogs right now to sort of remediate the forest areas that have been cut, so that we can start transitioning those to silvopasture. So we're sort of using the hogs as a cleaning, and we'll go in and plant specific things that they'll eat so that they actually will root up the forest, and then we can clean it up, because after 20 years after cutting, it's briar.
Right.
It's better for the pigs to get pricked than the kids.
Right.
At least that's their opinion. The children. And then we also we do a significant amount of pastured poultry. We have probably it's hard to say because we had a storm a while back that broke some of our pens, and our chickens are kind of everywhere, some of them, but we probably have about 200 laying hens, probably about 25 roosters that I haven't been able to catch yet, that you'll hear every once in a while. And then I do a lot of vegetables. We do vegetable production in the past years, not this year because we had those floods. We're way behind. We typically do a small CSA. So I produce a diverse amount of vegetables, much like Andy and we're part of the Northeast office. It's all very intensive and small scale. I find that easier to manage for the workload that we have. And then I do a lot of work with researchers on crop rotations. specifically crop rotations and, their impact on building organic soil health and soil matter. So I guess a little bit of everything. I like to say that I'm not an expert in much, but I know enough about a lot of things that I know where to find the answers.
Yes.
Yeah. But hogs are our primary revenue source here on the farm.
Mm-hmm.
We lose money on the vegetables because most of those go to food pantries.
Okay, great. Well, that's good work. Even if you're not making money on it. Well,
Well,
I do.
it depends on your perspective of revenue, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's just a different just using a different standard of measure, I guess.
Right. And as we talk a lot about here at NCAT, I mean, what are your farm goals? And your farm goal might not to be to make a lot of money. And it's just what are you doing to reach your farm goals? And so it sounds like that's one of your goals for your farm. So that's a perfect enterprise. I do have to ask Mike. You may get inundated with questions, so maybe you're being quiet about a topic I do know that I would consider an expert in, and that is industrial hemp.
Yeah. I was fortunate to be able to get involved the first year that we were growing here in Kentucky. Actually had a little bit of arm twisting from some really good friends at Fibershed, because they had some funding. I had helped pass the legislation here in Kentucky, and there was research projects going on, so I got to participate early on in a project with Fibershed in Patagonia called the Kentucky Cloth Project, where we grew and processed sustainable textiles. So I have been producing industrial hemp for since 2014. Yeah, I do have a bit of experience around diseases and pests and production. It's a difficult crop because it's got so many uses. But yeah, I definitely have information. That's probably one of the areas as you said, I don't want to say it, but I probably could classify as an expert there.
Well, and I was thinking back to your earlier comment about how NCAT, we share the whole story, whether it's good or bad, and, provide all of the information. And I think you do that with hemp. You don't paint it as butterflies and rainbows. It's a hard crop and a hard industry and market to be in. So you definitely share the whole truth about that enterprise.
Well, thank you. It is. I mean, it's tough, but it has a lot of potential, just like, but it's farming. I mean, that's the thing. You're still farming,
Yes.
like what? It's not easy.
Right.
We spent 50 years or 70 years, getting kids off the farm. I was talking about this with another gentleman. I won't name drop, but and it is like, we spent 70 years getting kids off the farm and making it think it was simple. So now it's like, oh, well, that's what simple folk do. And the reality is, I mean, some of the most uneducated farmers I know are the smartest people you will ever meet, and it's
Absolutely.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
a complex ecosystem, and it's a completely different worldview, right? You think about, I don't know for you, but I remember like the first time I like looked at the world when I walked in with that lettuce, like trying to sell it. That was the first time I'd ever viewed the world from what I call a farm economy, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? This whole wave of emotions and thought processes and issues that you have to deal with. So
Yes, it's so complex. You're right. It is not an easy calling to be a farmer. That's for sure. That's for sure. So we've heard a little bit about you and some of your areas of expertise. Could you share just a little bit about maybe some of the projects you've already gotten plugged into here at NCAT, and ways that you see yourself contributing to the NCAT team, and some of the things you're excited to work on here?
So no, I mean, I think that's one of the things that before we started this conversation, we're talking about is how excited I am about feeling like the things I'm doing are in line with my goals, and I think so far I've really only been focused on two projects: the farmer rancher stress networks out of the Northeast, working on identifying farmer stressors, and then how to help create support systems for that. And then the other one is this Healthcare Without Harm USDA block grant that's working on increasing plant-based proteins from local producers into large institutional hospitals. And that's really exciting because we're able to coordinate between the manufacturers of the finished products that they're using, and then knowing that we have to increase their producer, be able to network them to the farmers and start building those communication lines and creating some SOPs, so that smaller farmers who wouldn't someone like me think, well, now I can grow an acre of dry beans and have a place to sell it, but how do I do that? And so it's really exciting to think. Again, it's that whole approach, right? It's the whole system, because now we're not just looking at how are farmers growing food and are they treating the land right. Now we're looking at how are the people that are taking the food turning it into something that someone in hospitals, right, the most vulnerable, well, probably not the most vulnerable, but one of the most vulnerable, how is it getting to them? And so it's looking at this whole bigger picture. And so that really excites me when we're able to look at cross sections of the supply chain or culture or society or whatever it is we're trying to fix.
Yeah, and it has that connection back to your very first experience trying to sell lettuce into a school, right?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, older and wiser now. Well, I guess older anyways, but I sort of understand some of the challenges and why they're there. And then I'm continually working on crop rotations, cover crop rotations. I'll be doing some publications, and we're working on a workshop for the spring, a day workshop for pastured hogs in a forest-based system. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to crank out as much as I can for everybody, but also trying to integrate here into the Kentucky community with some of the organizations that are doing great work too. So
yes, and I know you and I have talked about it, but I'll be plugging you into our Arm to Farm and veteran work. I know we kind of alluded to it. You alluded to it earlier, but you've done a lot of work with farmer veterans, as you're a veteran yourself, and so you have great connections all across the country, but especially there in your part of the country. So I'm excited to get to utilize your expertise and have you plug into our work with farmer veterans.
Yeah, well, I mean, how could you resist? Like, I mean, you've built that Arm to Farm is such a great program. I mean, it does such a great job with the networking piece, whereas most of the other programs do a great job educating, but the network creates a support system and a natural ecosystem where thoughts and resource sharing can take place. And that's, I mean, so who wouldn't want to be able to plug in and help with that? So I'm excited.
Well, that's what I think, but yeah, no, it's super fun, and I'm super glad to have you on the team to be helping us expand our work in that area. Well, Mike, it has been great hearing from you and kind of hearing your thoughts and what you're excited to work on and what you bring to NCAT. We definitely are glad to have you on the team. Is there anything else you want our listeners to know about you or know about your experiences or your work or, your thoughts about the future of sustainable agriculture? I know you're a deep systems thinker, and I always like hearing your perspectives on kind of where you see things headed.
I will say, we talked about I'll leave with this now that you put it out there like that. I was when I was sitting down in the office and we were talking about my title, Sustainable Ag Specialist. I kind of, get proud, but then I'm also like, oh dear, no, there's two inherent problems right there, right? The first is I'm a specialist, and we know how Wendell Berry feels about those specialists. So, that, but then also the concept of sustainable, right? I mean, I don't feel like I'm doing this work because we've got something great that we should be sustaining.
Right.
So I guess I would say, to people, go outside, read some Wendell Berry, and try not to be a specialist like me.
Oh, Mike. Well, Mike, we are so glad to have you here. And I know our NCAT clients, our ATTRA clients, those who are listening to this podcast are really going to enjoy getting to know you over the coming years through your workshops, your publications, podcasts. You definitely will be hearing more from Mike and learning from him. So he's just such a great addition to our team. Mike is officially considered part of our Northeast office, working with Andy Pressman and the team out of the Northeast office, but he is working from his farm in Kentucky, as we mentioned. So you will see Mike around, and we will make sure and put his email address in the show notes. It's mikeL@ncat.org. And that's a great way to connect to Mike if you have questions for him, or if you think he can help you, talk through something that's going on your farm. He's here to answer questions and provide that technical assistance. And we really look forward to hearing more from Mike. So thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to you again sometime soon.
Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information can be found in the notes. And please leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. We'd also appreciate it if you could fill out a brief survey to tell us what you thought of the podcast. It helps us improve our content. A link to the survey is included in the notes. I'm your host, Rich Myers. Alan Puckett and I produce ATTRA Voices from the Field at the National Center for Appropriate Technologies headquarters in Butte, Montana, with support from the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATTRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the view of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.